A young white girl was left hanging with a sign Indian land until a lonely Comanche cut her free. The prairie held its breath. Wind combed the yellow grasses in long, patient strokes. Shadows stretched in the cottonwoods like old regrets, and the moon, thin and bone-pale, hung over it all as though watching from a world that no longer believed in mercy. She hung from a crooked branch at the edge of a dry riverbed, her feet barely brushing the cracked earth below. A young white girl, maybe 17, maybe younger. It was hard to tell with the bruises along her neck and the dirt in her lashes. Her dress, once pale as winter milk, was torn at the shoulder and soaked at the hem with something darker than mud. Her arms were slack, head dipped forward. A wooden sign swayed from a rope around her chest, the black letters scratched by a cruel, hurried hand. Indian land. They had left her here like a warning. But the girl was not dead. Not yet. Far across the grasslands, long past a line where even crows stopped circling, a man walked alone with no trail to follow. He moved like smoke, silent, steady, half part of the dusk itself. His name, long forgotten by white tongues, was Tony, and he did not live among his people anymore. The Comanche said he walked with too many ghosts. The settlers called him savage. He spoke to neither. He had been hunting deer when the wind brought him something stranger than blood, a stillness not born of night, but shame. It sat heavy in the air, like a secret left out to rot. And so he followed it. When he found her, he said nothing. He stood beneath the branch and looked up at the broken girl, the way one might look at a fallen foe, pitiful and wrong, but not past saving. He did not shout or run. He only untied the sign first, letting it fall with a hollow clap onto the roots. Then, using his knife, he cut through the rope and caught her as she dropped like a sack of cotton. She made a sound, a breath barely, but it was enough. He laid her down beside the tree, brushing the hair from her face, his fingers gentler than they had any right to be. Her skin was sunburnt and winter pale. Her lips cracked. There was blood behind her ear and purple blooming along her collarbone. Whoever did this had made it look like a justice, but it stank of cowardice. Tony touched her pulse and found it fluttering faintly. He did not ask who she was. He did not wonder what crime she'd been accused of. He only wrapped her in the buffalo hide blanket from his saddle, slung her across his horse, and rode south into the darker part of the woods, where even whispers could not follow. He took her to the cave. It wasn't much, a hollow tucked in a bluff near a river bend, half covered in moss and cold shadows, but it had a fire pit and cedar branches laid for a bed. He'd lived there alone since the last white treaty bled his family from the land. No one knew of it. That was the point. She didn't wake the first night. He fed her drops of water between her lips and tucked warm stones beside her for heat. On the second morning, her eyes cracked open, just barely, just long enough to see the flicker of flames and the silhouette of a man sitting across from her, carving wood with slow, even movements. She blinked, but her body did not move. The world was too far, too soft. Her voice came like dust. "Am I dead?" Tony didn't answer. He placed another log on the fire. The dog that sometimes came to sleep near his door, thin and half-wild, lifted its ears but did not bark. By the third day, she sat up. She didn't thank him. He didn't ask her to. There was a silence between them, wide as a canyon, but it did not feel cruel, only quiet like snow. On the fourth evening, she asked again, "Why'd you cut me down?" He stirred the fire, poking the embers. Smoke curled between them like a living thing. "You were breathing." That was all he said. She stared at the flames as if hoping they might explain more. Her hand trembled as she reached for the cup beside her bedroll. He watched her from the corner of his eye, not like a man watching prey, but like a man who had learned not to trust hope too soon. Her name, she said, was Ella. She didn't know where her mother was, hadn't seen her brother in weeks. The man who was supposed to protect her had thrown her to the crowd the moment the mob asked for blood. There had been shouting rumors, talk of Indian sympathizers and stolen cattle, and a white girl found too far outside the church line. Someone needed to hang. She'd been there. That was enough. Tony did not blink. He simply handed her a piece of cornbread and turned back to his carving. The next morning, She tried to stand. Failed. Tried again. He offered no hand, but steadied her elbow when she nearly fell. Outside the cave, the sun caught the frost on the river's edge, turning it to gold. She stood in the doorway, leaning on the post, and looked out over the land like a child seeing it for the first time. "It's quiet here," she whispered. He nodded. "Too quiet for some." She didn't answer, but she didn't step back inside, either. That night, as the fire burned low and her breathing slowed, she whispered to the ceiling of the cave, "They meant to leave me there for the wolves, I think. Or maybe just for the message." Tony was already lying down, his back turned, but his voice reached her anyway. "Wolves wouldn't touch you," he said. She didn't ask why. The next few days passed like river stones, smooth, small, one by one. She began to wash her own face, to braid her hair. He brought her berries in a hollowed-out gourd. She mended the tear in her dress with thread from his pack. Still, they spoke little, but there was a rhythm now, a quiet beat between them that neither rushed nor questioned. On the sixth morning, she woke to find the noose burning in the fire. Tony had thrown it in during the night. The sign, too. She sat beside the flames and watched the last of the rope curl into ash. He didn't look at her, but she knew then she was no longer hanging. Not in that tree, not in her mind. She was still breathing, and he had seen that first. Far above, the sun broke through the clouds and cast light on the mouth of the cave like a quiet blessing. The girl turned her face to it and closed her eyes. The wind came again, soft this time, brushing past him like a memory forgiven. Somewhere in that stillness, something small and sacred had begun. Not love, not yet, but the part that comes before. The choosing, the breath, the mercy, and just enough warmth to make a seed believe in spring. The days began to layer gently atop each other, like snow falling on old wood. Quiet, patient, soft enough to forget the cold was still there. Ella moved slower than most girls her age, but not from fear. Her limbs obeyed her now. It was trust that took more time. Trust in her own body, in the man across the fire, in the silence they share like a language passed down without words. She slept in the cave, her head near the curved stone wall, where the light from the fire painted soft orange across her cheek. He slept nearer the mouth, never fully turning his back to the night. That was the rhythm of it, neither too close, never far. Tony spoke little. He woke before the sun, returning with fish or quail, sometimes nothing at all. His eyes were dark, unreadable, like the river when the wind wasn't blowing. When she asked a question, he'd answer only what was needed. She'd long since stopped asking more than once. But Ella was not made to stay still forever. By the seventh morning, she followed him outside, leaned on the branch she'd whittled into a cane, watched him work as he skinned a rabbit on a flat rock. "You live here alone?" He paused, nodded. "Why?" A long silence followed, not heavy, just old, he said, without looking up. There was no room anywhere else. Her fingers wrapped tighter around the cane. "For you?" His eyes flicked toward her. "For peace." That was all he said. But she heard more than that. She heard the names unsaid, the fires unseen, the kind of sorrow that didn't scream. It just stopped showing up to be counted. She started doing small things, gathering dry moss, rinsing vegetables in the stream, laying out the rabbit skins to dry under the slanted sun. Nothing grand, but every act felt like she was sewing herself back into the fabric of living. She found his name not from his mouth, but from the bough he left resting against the wall, a gift from someone gone, carved with the letters Tony in careful strokes. She touched it once and didn't again. It rained for 3 days without pause. The cave darkened, grew heavy with wet smoke and the scent of damp earth. One night, lightning split a tree near the stream. The thunder followed, so close it made her flinch. She covered her ears like a child, bracing for more. But there was no cruelty in the cave, no voices rising, no hands reaching. Only Tony, sitting still beside the fire, whittling the end of a new spear. She looked at him across the flames, his face unreadable, lit in copper tones. "You ever been hit?" she asked. The words slipped out like breath fogging a window. She didn't mean to ask, not like that. But once they were out, she didn't take them back. He didn't answer right away. She thought maybe he wouldn't. But then, in the hush of dripping rock, he said, "No, but I've seen the way a man looks when he knows he's going to do it again." She turned her eyes away, folded her hands in her lap. A thin crack of light shivered down the wall where the cave leaked. Rain fell into the tin pot she'd set there. Drip, drip, drip. Some time passed. "I thought I'd marry the preacher's son," she said quietly. It wasn't a story, just a sentence with too many bones inside it. "He used to bring me river stones. Said my eyes looked like them. Told me the Lord would bless our union if I learned to keep still." Tony didn't speak. Ella swallowed, lips dry. "When his cattle went missing, someone said I had something to do with it. Said I talked to brown men near the river. His father gave the crowd a reason. Said the land was cursed because of girls like me. Told them to put a rope on it." The fire cracked once, soft and tired. She wrapped her arms around her knees. Tony looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since she'd come down from that branch. Not with pity, not even with softness, just presence, as if she had finally become real to him. "You carry more weight than your frame shows," he murmured. She gave a tired smile. "So do you." The next day, the rain cleared. A woman came through the trees at dusk, old and bent, her hair long and silver as the moon. She rode no horse. Carried a basket of dried herbs, wrapped in cloth stitched with sun patterns. Ella tensed when she saw her, but Tony stood and raised his chin in quiet greeting. The woman, Wisa, said nothing at first. She crouched by the fire, warmed her hands. Her eyes studied Ella, not with suspicion, but with something older, a gaze that didn't need stories to know pain. She placed a bundle near Ella's feet. Inside, there was yarrow, wild mint, and a carved wooden comb. "For healing," Wisa said simply. Then, to Tony, "The land remembers what was done. So does the girl." He nodded once. Wisa stayed for meal, roast quail and pine root tea, then vanished into trees as silently as she'd come. Ella watched her go. "She's Comanche too?" "Apache." Ella tilted her head. "Is that strange?" Tony looked up from the fire. Only to people who think borders matter more than breath. That night, Ella dreamt of her mother's face, but it was blurred, distant, like watching someone wave through a rain-covered window. She woke before dawn, breath caught in her throat, her fingers gripping the fur bedding as though it could bring her home. She sat up. The cave was dim, but she could make out his shape near the fire, sitting awake, shoulders hunched forward. She didn't speak. She just lay back down and stared at the flickering light. The next morning, she whittled a figure from a thick stick. It had no eyes, no face, just a shape, something to hold. She left it near his bow. He didn't say anything. But that evening, he placed a polished stone beside her cup, smooth and shaped like a heart. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something like choosing. A small grace laid beside another, with no explanation needed. As the moon rose full and fat above the bluff, the wind carried voices farther than it should have. Distant, ragged, riders perhaps, or just echoes. Ella stepped out of the cave, her arms wrapped tight against the wind. Tony joined her. She didn't ask if he heard them. She knew he had. He stood beside her, eyes on the trees. "They'll come looking, won't they?" "Maybe not today," he said, "but one day." He didn't answer. The fire behind them popped, sending up sparks like tiny stars falling in reverse. Ella turned toward him, her voice steady. "If they come, will you run?" He looked at her, then, not through her, not around her, at her, and after a long moment, he said, "Not unless you want to." The wind tugged at her hair. She nodded. That was enough. Tomorrow would wait its turn. Tonight, there was a quiet rhythm of safety, the breath between storms, the hush that only comes when two broken things begin to fit beside each other, not mended, not perfect, but aligned just enough to rest. And somewhere deep inside her chest, a warmth grew, not love, not yet, but the soft, stubborn bloom of something that refused to die. The first warmth of spring came not with blossoms, but with birdsong. It seeped in slow through the trees, through the cracks in the cave, through the bones of those who had learned to flinch before the thaw. Snow was only memory now, forgotten under the dirt where seeds swelled in secret. Ella rose with the sun most days, not because she had to, but because stillness no longer soothed her. She liked the way the light bent across the river stones, how the smoke from the fire curled in golden ribbons when morning hit it just right. She swept the cave, boiled herbs. She stitched a lining inside her old dress with hide Wisa had left. It didn't look like home, but it began to feel like one. Tony watched her without watching. He moved around her, as if afraid to disturb something fragile that might take flight. But sometimes, when she turned quick, she caught his gaze lingering. Not hungry, not sad, just present, like he was learning her face the way you learn the bends in a trail you will walk for a long time. He never reached for her. She never reached for him. Still, they had built something, a rhythm of chores and silences and wordless offerings. A comb left by the bedroll, a boiled egg left near his fire pit rock. Once, she plaited a cord from dried grass and tied it around a jug. He ran his fingers along it the next day, then made her a spoon from cherry wood. The world outside their cave still turned, but for a time they did not. One evening, as dusk gathered in the folds of the hills, Ella asked the question that had waited longest. What happened to your family? The words came gentle, like a hand placed on someone's shoulder. No force, only readiness. Tony didn't speak at first. He laid another stick on the fire, stared into the flame. Then, low and slow, he said, "There was a treaty, the kind where white men shake your hand with one fist and hold a torch in the other." His voice didn't rise. If anything, it grew quieter. They said we could stay near the river. Said they'd bring grain, medicine, teachers. He reached for a stone and turned it in his palm. My brother didn't believe them. My father did. The fire cracked. A piece of bark crumbled into ash. They came before the harvest. At night, burned the lodges, shot anyone who ran. My brother took a bullet in the back. My father, he died trying to speak peace. Ella's breath caught, but she didn't interrupt. I survived because I wasn't there. I was with my uncle gathering flint. He exhaled, a long breath, slow and steady. After that, I left. Couldn't stand the tribe. Couldn't stomach the whites. So I walked out of both. Ella reached toward the fire and nudged the coal back into place. Her hand shook. You're not the only one who had to disappear to survive. Tony looked up at her. She didn't flinch. My father died drunk in a ditch, she said. My mother tried to raise us right, but there's no fighting with a man when he decides to turn mean. My brother sold me to the rancher 2 counties over. Said I talked back too much. Too proud for the Lord. That man, he preached and kissed his Bible and still raised his belt when I didn't smile sweet enough. Her voice didn't tremble, but her fingers tightened on her skirt. He told the town I was a thief, a temptress. He said I wandered too close to Indian camps, that I deserved the rope. She swallowed, hard. They didn't argue. Tony's face didn't move, but something in his jaw shifted. Ella took a breath. Let it out slow. I don't want your pity, she said. I don't give pity, he answered. She looked at him again, and something passed between them, not understanding, but something close to it, a recognition, like 2 ghosts passing on the same bridge. Later that night, she couldn't sleep. The stars above the bluff pulsed faintly, veiled behind pale clouds. She walked down to the water and sat on a smooth stone by the edge, listening to the hush of it all. Tony came and stood behind her. Not close, just near enough for her to know he was there. I don't dream much anymore, she said softly. Good, he replied. No, she said. I miss it. Tony lowered himself to the ground beside her. Dreams don't stay warm, he said. They come. They leave. She turned to him then. His face, half lit by starlight, seemed carved from something ancient, a cliffside, a burial mask. And yet there was a gentleness in the shape of his eyes, in the way he waited. I think I dream with my eyes open now, she whispered. His gaze didn't leave hers. For a long time they sat like that, neither moving, neither speaking. The dog, Burlap, as she had named him, lay curled a few feet behind, one eye open, tail twitching. She reached out. Her hand found his, not grasping, not desperate, just resting there. Tony did not pull away. He did not speak, but his fingers curled around hers like the first turn of a leaf before spring. Not love, not yet, but something sacred, something whole. The next day, Wisa returned. Her eyes looked sharper and her basket fuller. There are men riding south, she told him, looking for a girl who didn't hang long enough. Ella's face paled. They know I'm alive? Wisa shrugged. They know what fear tells them. They smell something unfinished. Tony stood. His eyes narrowed, his mouth a tight line. How far? Maybe a day. Maybe more. Tony looked at Ella, but said nothing. She met his gaze. I won't go back. I didn't ask you to. She nodded once. Wisa placed something in Ella's hand, a small woven token, red and black, shaped like a flame. For bravery, she said. Not for winning, just for standing. Then she left. That night, Tony gathered his weapons. He sharpened a long knife until it gleamed, packed dried meat into a skin pouch, rolled furs tight. Ella helped without being asked. They didn't speak of plans. They only moved. Two people who had learned that silence, when shared with care, could become a kind of music. When the stars came out, they sat together on the edge of the bluff. You scared? She asked him. He didn't answer. Because I am, she added after a while. He looked over, and his voice was soft as a worn prayer. I don't fear what comes, only losing what's worth staying for. Her eyes stung. She looked away. You don't have to protect me, she said. I'm not. Then why help me at all? He was quiet for a long time. Then, because you saw me, before I said a word. She turned toward him. I'll stay, she said, if you want me to. He didn't smile, but something shifted in his face. You already did. The wind picked up. Trees whispered like old women gossiping behind hands. Burlap barked once and went silent. They stood together, side by side. Not lovers. Not yet. But the space between them had changed shape. The ghosts no longer stood between them. They stood beside them now. And for the first time, they didn't walk alone. The wind changed first. It rolled down from the north in a steady hush, stirring the trees, flattening the grasses, carrying the scent of men not born of these hills. Boots, sweat, gun oil. Wrongness. The dog caught it before either of them did. Head up, hackle stiff, tail straight as a whip. Tony stood from the creek bed and turned toward the ridge. His shoulders shifted just enough to darken the air around him. No panic, no fear, just knowing. Ella followed his gaze. The sky looked the same. The world still sang with spring. But something in the ground whispered different. They're close now, he said. She didn't ask how he knew. She just nodded and began packing what could be carried. He didn't stop her. The cave held no future, only memory. By dusk, the fire was out, the floor swept clean. No trace of them remained, save for a carved spoon left on the stone ledge. Tony placed it there. Quietly, they moved east, toward the canyons where water whispered through stone and the land narrowed into paths only deer remembered. He carried the bow. She carried the dried meat. Between them, nothing passed but breath. That night, they made no fire. She lay close to him, wrapped in his blanket, listening to the heartbeat of earth beneath them. His hand never touched her skin, but his presence wrapped around her like something older than safety, a kind of promise. In the morning, they saw the smoke, thin, rising from far off, curling like a finger pointing their way. Riders. 4, maybe 5. Ella's breath stilled. Tony crouched beside a flat rock, scanned the land. His eyes narrowed, not in fear, but calculation. The warrior in him stirred like a buried drumbeat. Not for revenge. Not even for battle. Only for her. She stepped beside him. I can run faster now, she said. I know. You could leave me. Ride north. They won't follow you. He looked at her. His silence told her the answer before his voice did. I would follow you instead. They didn't speak again until the horses came. Midday, high sun, heat rising off the stone like sweat from fever. The first man rode a gray mare, fine coat, town saddle. Face like a drought, leathery, sharp. The kind of man who'd preach forgiveness on Sunday and lit the rope on Monday. The others looked younger. One chewed on jerky. One grinned too wide. One held a rifle too tight. Ella stood in full view, chin high. That's her, the preacher muttered. Noose didn't do its job, after all. Tony didn't move. He stood half a step behind her, unarmed but not unready. She's with me, he said. She's not yours, the man spat. She belongs to the justice of the town. She belongs to no one. Ella said it, voice clear, carrying over wind and dirt. The men laughed. One shifted in his saddle. She was a problem before. Don't need her causing more. The Comanche can go back to his rocks. Tony stepped forward. His voice didn't rise. It came soft, like a low storm on the edge of a ridge. Right away. The grinning one raised his rifle. The air snapped. Tony moved before Ella saw it. The arrow flew faster than breath, striking the man's wrist. He howled, dropped the rifle. The horse reared. Chaos broke. Ella ran to the dog, who barked madly, tail low. A shot rang out, missed wide. Tony didn't pull another arrow. He stood calm, another at the ready, eyes never leaving the preacher. Try again, he said. The man didn't. Another rider bolted, yanking his horse around like a boy who just learned fear. Silence returned. The preacher's lips curled. You think you've saved her, but this land doesn't forget. You live out here too long, and it makes you foolish. Makes you think you can change what people believe. Tony lowered his bow, just slightly. I don't care what they believe, only what she does. The preacher spat in the dirt, wheeled his horse, and rode away with the others, grumbling curses that trailed behind him like dying embers. Ella stood frozen until the dust cleared. Then she exhaled. Tony approached, slow, calm. You all right? She nodded, then laughed, a shaky, stunned thing. You didn't even draw blood. He tilted his head. Didn't need to. The dog ran in circles, confused but unharmed. They camped that night in a shallow cove where wild plum trees grew, their blossoms falling like confetti. Ella lit a small fire. Tony carved within silence. After a while, she whispered, Thank you. He looked up. You already said it. She smiled. Not for saving me, for choosing not to kill them. He studied her a moment. I've seen what killing does. It doesn't end things. It echoes. She nodded, understanding in her marrow. The stars blinked on, one by one, like old friends returning. He handed her the carving. A bird mid-flight. Wings flared. For your stories, he said. She turned it over in her palm, held it close. They moved again in the morning. Not running now, just walking, following no path but the one made by their own footprints. Eventually, they found a place where the land dipped into a wide green hollow, ringed with trees. The water ran slow and clear. Deer prints marked the edges. Here they made a life. It took weeks to shape a shelter. Tony built the frame. Ella packed the walls with grass and mud. A stove stone was laid, a bench carved, a garden planted. They didn't speak of what had passed. There was no need. It was part of the land now, part of the silence between their hands when they worked side by side. He made her a new dress from tan hides. She stitched him a pouch lined with her hair. One morning, months later, she woke to find him watching her, face softened by light and time. Are you staying? He asked. She laughed softly. I never left. He kissed her then, gently, carefully, as if kissing something that had survived a storm. They didn't name it love, but they didn't need to. It grew in the soil they tilled, in the meals they shared, in the silence they no longer feared. The ghosts still came, but they stood at a distance now, quiet as dust in old corners. And the fire line, the place where destruction meets rebirth, had been crossed, not in flame, but in kindness, in patience, in the brave choosing of one another. If this tale stirred something in you, Subscribe for more stories that echo through the dust and silence of the Old West.